welcome to Sport for Business. We are joined today by Mark Scanlon. He is the director of the National League out of the FAI, the man who is responsible for the domestic game in many ways here in Ireland. We got the Premier Division up and running last weekend, the first division of the Women's National League coming up this weekend as well. You're very welcome to Sport for Business, Mark.
Thanks, Rob. It's good to be here.
Tell me something. You were handed the role, into the job July of last year, just a couple of weeks before the resumption of the season. It must have been a challenging juggling act to try and make sure that everything which needed to fit into place actually did. How did you find it?
Yeah, look, it was certainly a strange time to be starting a new role for me. Thankfully, I've obviously been in the FAI. This is my 13th year now this year. So, a very good idea of the landscape and a lot of the stakeholders and everybody that was going to be involved. But coming into the league role was obviously a great opportunity for me last year. And we were just ready to resume after the delay from COVID-19. So it was a baptism of fire in that sense. And coming back in, we were very much going into the unknown as we resumed the season at the end of last July. But yeah, thankfully we managed to successfully complete last season, finished the campaigns, both the men's and women's leagues, the FAI Cup men's and women's, and also some of the underage, under 17 and 19 competitions as well. So it was certainly a very difficult few months for everybody involved, from our own point in the association, but also from the clubs, the volunteers, players, coaches, referees, and everybody involved. But everybody pulled together really in the end, and we managed to see out the season, which was great. And it's given us an opportunity to then reflect on that and plan for the new season.
Was that something that was formed on the foundations of what you achieved last year? Because getting through it, getting it done, was something that might seem like a low bar, but in the circumstances was actually a real achievement for everybody involved in it. Did that set a new way of interaction and of thinking amongst the clubs and amongst you at the FAI in terms of what we could achieve with the League of Ireland?
Yeah, I think, there's two parts to that. Certainly last year was very much about making sure that we completed the season. I mean, so many teams and players had put so much into the previous pre-season. The league had obviously been up and running a few weeks just before the pandemic. So the main aim was certainly to finish, and it was very much an ongoing process. We were learning on a week-to-week basis for the different challenges that COVID was thrown at us. There was changes in government regulations, obviously on a regular basis as well, which affected how elite sport was being run, and it affected attendances, it affected things like players coming into the country, teams going away on European travel. So all of that was a challenge. But one of the things that it brought from the positive point of view was it meant a lot more cooperation and collaboration with ourselves and the clubs over the last number of months. So, we met on a lot more of a regular basis. We spoke about club issues a lot more regularly than we previously would have. So I think that's given us a great opportunity to develop them relationships. And in a strange way, it's been a brilliant part of the job for me in that way, because it's allowed us to develop them relationships quicker than maybe would have been in the past if it was a regular season and football was just running as normal. So it's certainly thrown up the challenges, but it's put us in a good position ahead of the start of the new season.
It obviously has been really difficult for the clubs. We spoke last week with a number of the chairs, with Conor Hoey at Drogheda, Kieran Medlow at Shamrock Rovers, and then Daniel Lambert, the COO at Bohemians. And all of them spoke about the fact of the domestic game here being one which is really of and for and with the fans, and having a challenge whereby we were able to broadcast games, but we weren't able to get that visceral feel of actually being in the stadium. They'll have learned from that. We clearly heard that last week. But how do you think that the first half of this season will go? It's unlikely that we're going to get any fans into the ground before the summer at the earliest, I would imagine. Are the clubs ready for that? Have they girded their loins and prepared for the challenges that still lie ahead?
Yeah, I think, going back to last season, I think it has to be a lot of credit going to the clubs in how resourceful they were last year to get through the season. It was an extremely difficult time, like it's been for businesses obviously across the country, and League of Ireland clubs are no different. They're small businesses in a lot of ways and in most ways, and they had obviously professional players on contracts, they had staff members, and it was a really challenging and very worrying time for the clubs. But thankfully, we managed to be able to obviously have a financial package to help support them, and Government and Sport Ireland were very supportive in that, and understanding the need for the National League to continue and to finish. But the club's done an incredible amount of work off the pitch, in terms of their fundraising activities, in terms of their own resources and how they managed to pull on that and the support that they had. And I think one of the other areas that it really showed us over the course of last season is what a loyal fan base that we actually have in the League of Ireland. And I think that's underestimated a lot of times. There's obviously a lot of comparison towards bigger leagues in Europe with bigger attendances and so on. But I think what's really evident in the League of Ireland fan base is it's a really loyal fan base that's there. It's there to support the clubs through thick and thin. And that was evident last year. And I think that's been a big help to the clubs, obviously, going into the start of this year, because some clubs have actually reported increases in terms of memberships for this year. So people have become very closely aligned to their club over the period of the pandemic, and worried whether their club may survive, or worried whether when they'd be back in stadiums to see the games again. And it's created that real draw for people to get back into stadiums again. And the clubs, as you mentioned, did have to be resourceful in the off season again. They did have to look at their budgets, and they had to make cuts accordingly to make sure that they would get through this season. But we certainly worked with them as part of the club licensing process and the budgeting process and the financial package that we put in place for this year. And we're very lucky to have SSE Electricity back on board as a title sponsor, and Bank of Ireland have come on board as an associate sponsor. RTE Sport continues to be our broadcast partner again for this year as well. So, with that support and with everybody rallying around, we're in a position that hopefully we'll be in a stable financial position for this year, and then in a post-COVID era that we can kick on and develop the league even further.
There were 3 great deals to get over the line. I know SSE Electricity have been there for over a decade, but still it was great to get that extra commitment, and they've rolled it over into the Women's National League as well. So there's a joint sponsorship on that for the first time. Bank of Ireland as well, talking very much about equality in terms of putting into the club, which is just as much for the women's team as it is for the men's team. The broadcast as well, we've got LOI TV now, so the First Division and the Women's National League, all of those games are being streamed live. How has the sort of the mood been between the First Division clubs and the Premier clubs as well? Because they are in a different place, but now they've all got the streaming that they can get their fan base behind. How has it been for them? Is it a different equation for the teams playing in First Division as to how they approach the season?
Yeah, I think, going back to last year in terms of the streaming area, obviously Watch LOI with RTE Sport was primarily, or was exclusively for the Premier Division for last year. And I think the First Division clubs done a fantastic job of ensuring that their own fans then were kept up to speed with all the games and didn't miss a minute of the action by the streaming platforms that they put in place. But one of the things we were keen to do in the off season is to make sure that the league brand was represented with that, and all of the clubs were under that single platform. So by developing LOI TV this year for the First Division and for the Women's National League, it's allowed us to amalgamate all them streaming resources and put them under the one banner. It provides a lot more consistency for fans as well to know where it is, as opposed to jumping between YouTube pages, Facebook pages, or club websites to find a different stream each week. So we want a central base for the fans to be able to ensure that they can tune in on a weekly basis to whether it's their own club or whether they're tuning in as a neutral fan. So I think, that's been very positive in terms of how that's come about for this year. Again, there is an element of it that's really important now while we're in the pandemic. So when fans are not in stadiums, but there's a bigger, wider part of the overall streaming packages for the leagues, even in a post-COVID era, that we continue to be able to reach out to a wider fan base, whether it's here or overseas. And I think that's something we very much want to see staying in the league as we move on across the men's league and the women's league. And it's part of, I suppose, the exciting new era of digital transformation and the various different aspects that can be brought to it. So I think there's a lot more to come on that sense, and this will only be the start of it.
I think that is really important. It's great to have had the Watch LOI with the RTE standards of broadcast. It's been it has been like having their cameras in the grounds for most of the time, with the commentary and all of the surround that goes with that. LOI TV is at a lower level. The Pixelot cameras that have been installed in there, we haven't seen the output of that in a competitive environment yet. We will do this weekend, but the price point for the first division is €79 for the season. Most of the clubs are giving that away to their season ticket holders. It's free for the Women's National League. Now, you've got responsibility across all three of the areas, from the Premier to the first division to the Women's National League. How much hope is being invested now in the Women's National League? Because we've seen in Britain, we're going to have BBC and Sky Sports showing 3 games a week from the league there. The Euros are going to be held in England next year as well. So the women's game is really on the rise. We've got a good, powerful international team as well, hopefully doing well in the World Cup qualification. Is the Women's National League in a good enough position now to be able to capitalise on that increase in the interest?
Yeah, I think, broadcasting rights have been a very difficult one at the minute. TV companies have been no different than the rest of businesses. Their resources have been hit and their finances have been hit, obviously. And we've seen that with the Air Sport announcements last week. And Air Sport were a great partner for the League of Ireland over the past number of years in conjunction with RTE Sport as well. So it's a difficult environment. Certainly, we do look enviously towards the UK when we see some of the broadcasting rights that are there in both men's and women's football. And look, that comes with the territory that is, but we're very hopeful for the future that we'll see a lot more broadcasting rights and a lot more interest around both the men's league and in particular in the women's league as it continues to grow, because we're now ready to embark on the 11th season of the Women's National League. With SSE Airtricity coming on board as the title sponsors and Bank of Ireland involved as the associate sponsors, we're definitely seeing a huge increase in the commercial activity around the league. And as we produce LOI TV this year, said the platform is free for fans this year, and that's really to make sure that we can bring it to a wider audience and people can see the standard that's out there, because it's a really high standard. It's continued to improve year on year, and the clubs have invested heavily in their infrastructure in women's football, and it's really grown. You mentioned obviously our senior international team as well, and Vera's back on board for this campaign as well for the qualifiers. So hopefully we'll have a good campaign at senior level and in general women's sport, but in particular for us, women's football has gone from strength to strength, and we see huge areas of growth coming over the next couple of months in terms of the Women's National League, hopefully, but certainly as part of the longer term strategy for the future. It's a key part of the development of the League of Ireland.
If we could get 5%, maybe 10% of the football fans who pledge themselves to Manchester United or Liverpool or Leeds or Chelsea or whoever it might be, could get them engaged and interested in the domestic league here, it could transform it so that we could be in front of filled stadia and all of the benefits that brings in terms of then investment and upgrading the quality of the game and the players. Do you think, is that a viable wish for the next couple of years? Is it of benefit to us that travel is going to be restricted, that those fans who would have headed to Old Trafford on a Saturday morning might not be able to go, and will they go to Shelbourne or Bowes or Rovers or Sligo Rovers instead?
Yeah, look, I think it's a positive and a negative for us in terms of a football point of view, that football is the most watched and most played sport in the world. So obviously from growing the game across the country, it's a huge positive. That's why we have the highest participation numbers involved in the sport, and why we have so many people who love the game. And obviously the negative side is then that football is available to everybody almost every night of the week at this stage, from the Premier League in the UK or the Champions League or whatever it might be. So there's obviously a lot of competition out there then competing with fans, but I think one of the areas that we can do better on from our point of view, and that the clubs can do better on, is ensuring we attract in younger fans. Because it's tugging at the heartstrings from young families coming in at a younger age is what makes them a League of Ireland fan. It's what made me a League of Ireland fan. A lot of my friends weren't brought to games as kids, but I was. And when I was brought to games as kids, then I had a huge affinity with the league growing up, and it's something that's always stayed with me. And I think if we miss that key window of trying to attract the younger fans, then there is every opportunity that they will stay supporting a team in a foreign country. Whereas we're certainly not looking to take away all them fans from other football that they watch, whether it's football in the UK or the Champions League. But we'd like them to also have an affinity to their League of Ireland team, and we'd love to see the parents of today who are long term, whether it's Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal fans, that they bring their kids to games in the League of Ireland, and they become a little bit more involved in that as well. So there's nothing wrong with having your team overseas who you support and who you like, but it's certainly great to see them have an affinity with their local club as well. And people will find once they get into that League of Ireland circle and they get used to going to games on a regular basis, they'll be able to see that you can't beat the atmosphere of being at a live game. And certainly for the young kids, being in a stadium environment on a weekly basis and getting a chance to watch your heroes then as you grow up. And one of the things that the League of Ireland has a huge benefit over compared to maybe some of the bigger leagues is that you're closer to the action, you're more involved. You can see these local heroes walking around your local towns or your local streets as well, and you can get the autographs, you can get the pictures with them and be involved. And for young kids growing up, that's massive to see the professional footballers that they're watching on the pitch and have that affinity and that closeness with them. So hopefully that's a fan base that we'd like to develop. And with the streaming services this year and some of the earlier kickoff times as well, it's hopefully opening it up to that wider family audience as well. And when fans return to stadiums, we'd love to see them people back in the stands.
Get them out on the streets wearing the kit, wearing the black and red stripes or the green and white hoops or whatever colour your team takes its fancy from. If I could give you one magical wish for the season ahead, for the remainder of this year, what would it be? We obviously want to get through it from a public health point of view. We don't want to have people falling sick as a result of going to football matches or playing in football matches. But other than that, what would be your main wish for now until the end of the campaign at the end of this year?
Yeah, I think definitely we can't overlook that initial point of the health and safety and getting through the season and make sure everybody is safe as the clubs and ourselves managed to do last year. So that's first and foremost. We're definitely in a privileged position that we're allowed to start the leagues under the elite exemptions right now. So that's something we don't take lightly and is at the forefront of our thoughts. But yeah, after that, I mean, again, the wishes depend on where we're at in terms of the pandemic. So if fans are back in stadiums, one of the wishes is to certainly see increased attendance and more interest in the games, but ultimately we want to see certainly a much broader interest across the various different media channels. We'd love to see more coverage for the league across the coming season as well, and we'd love to attract new sponsors and more investment into the league, because ultimately that's how it's going to grow. The only way for us to continue to improve the facilities and to continue to improve the conditions for players is more investment into the league. And whether that's through commercial partnerships or the continued government support that we have been receiving for the league. I mean, that's the key aspects is for us is to increase that investment and to drive that revenue into the league so we can help foster and develop it.
One step at a time, one game at a time. It's been a roller coaster 7-8 months for you in the role, but hopefully it will be a little bit calmer now. And the very best of luck. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mark Scanlon.